going on? Thanks for finally being on the podcast. I'm really excited to have you on.
Well, thank you for having me, Josh.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I was gonna say I always like to start with something a bit more fun, but I wanted to say you have a really cool name. You know,
Yes, I do.
you go by T3. A lot of people who know you, and that's because your full name is literally Thomas Thayyil Thomas.
That's right.
I like it. That's a creative name. First name, last name are the same. Is this a bit more common, let's say, in India or Indian culture?
It is. Actually, it is, glad you asked. It's my dad's name. And my dad passed when I was 26. And he was so influential in our lives. Both myself and my only brother, we both named our first kids after him. So you have literally three T3s in my family.
In the family?
Yes.
Well, that's a nice thing to do for your father, and I would say like a beautiful legacy to keep passing on. It is common though, right? Because the first name, last name, and then it keeps
Right.
revolving. I know from a few Indian friends that that's a bit more of a common
It
common
is a
piece of the
common thing.
culture.
That's exactly right.
So you grew up in India,
I grew up in a place called Kerala, which is south of India,
yeah?
southwest. Beautiful place. If you think about Chile, it looks like that, a miniature. Mountains on one side
Mountains.
and ocean on the other side,
Oh wow,
with about 32 rivers crisscrossing the state. So it is a very green state. So it's nicknamed as God's own country.
God's song country.
Yes.
Oh wow, that's beautiful. I've always wanted to. I haven't been able to visit India just yet, but it looks like a beautiful country, and it's so, to your point, very different. Like it's so large, and every spot is so different from the other, and it's also interesting to see the cultures. I'm assuming because of your name, it takes after Saint Thomas, right? Who
Right.
sort of evangelized in India. Yeah,
Yes, AD 52. So that's a big part of it. So you will see a lot of Thomases and Pauls in the place that I came from.
which is the Christian part of, right.
Yeah.
Is it Kerala, Calcutta
Kerala, I think Goa.
part? Goa is the other one. Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Nice. How long did you stay in India? Because I know you went to university there.
Yes. So I left India when I was 28. Married. My son was 10 months old. We went to the UK. I studied in Glasgow. My wife studied in Midland, England, Sheffield. So it was a interesting but tough time. This whole thing started there, Josh.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the big story was I started my career as a lecturer. So I taught finance for postgraduate courses. That was my first job. Then very quickly realized, hey, this is not for me. I like teaching, but I didn't want this to be a career. Then my wife and I decided, hey, we should just go explore other opportunities. And the best thing for us to do instead of immigrating blindly, just go study and figure out a career abroad. So at that time, believe it or not, we we looked at, like, we were not both not happy with what was going on in our life or career wise, and we were like, hey, we got to go do something about it and something radical. And this is with a kid that's probably 2 or 3 months old at the time. So our idea was, if we don't manage to find visas in good universities to study abroad, we are going to go to the mountains, rent a lot of land, and start a floriculture business. That was the plan.
Really?
Yes.
That that's an interesting plan B.
Yeah, exactly. So from either go deep into, she's a physical therapist, I'm in business and finance. So pursue that or become farmers and progress to some sort of floral essence manufacturer. That was the idea back then.
Interesting. Yeah, that must have been a move for you. I mean, it's like the tried and true immigration story that I felt. I mean, we immigrated from the Middle East. We were in Saudi at the time, but we went to Canada, and I was about 10 years old.
Yep.
And I remember how stressful it was for my parents, and just like any parents moving to a new city, a new country, that must have been hard. For you to in your late 20s, you're still relatively young. You have a newborn, a lot of responsibility, the pressure of that visa, man. If things don't work out, you go back. That's a lot to take on.
Oh, I have a really great story that I want to tell you there. So
Sure, let's do it.
I go to I go to Glasgow. So I'm studying at the University of Strathclyde. Quite bizarrely, I'm a Scottish chartered accountant as well. So when I joined Ernst& Young, so they sponsor your CA program, which is a 3-year program, not like the CPA here. and you have to take all the exams in one go. So there are three levels, five exams in first go, second, fourth, and then you have a big 1 day case study. If you fail twice, or if you fail more than two papers, you lose your job. It's no pressure, right? So half of my batch that started it actually couldn't complete the program. So I have pretty strong ties to Scotland that way. So I started the program, started applying for jobs, and so I got to the final rounds with Deloitte. That was my first application. I was super happy, super nervous, and I go to this is talk about an immigrant culture shock. Right? So the office is Aberdeen, which is the northernmost largest city in the UK, like in Glasgow, big on oil and gas. I wanted to make a career in energy. That was one of the reasons. Growing up in Kerala, a lot of our people work in the Middle East, Saudi, UAE, etc.
Dubai. Yeah.
So energy is kind of pretty natural. So that's something that I was really interested in. So Aberdeen was exciting because it's kind of the after Houston, the second oil and gas capital there. So I went there, and as part of the interview, this is all new, the cultural evaluation, testing, etc., and so on. We do it all the time at Teragonia too, when you have people coming in, making sure that our team can really work with them at a personal level. Right? There's a personality culture fit. So I go there, do the interview. I was so nervous, I fumbled the test. Test was not difficult, but I just fumbled it just because of the pressure. Like everything that you talked about the visa, like you're thinking about all that too much and overloading yourself, and you're going through
Yeah.
it.
And it's on your shoulders. Like you feel the weight, you know?
Exactly. And then so we go for lunch with the team, junior team. They're probably early 20s. I'm late 20s. So there's about a decade gap. And there's a kind of continent gap. So big cultural gap. I go there. John, I kid you not, I grew up in a very, very common household in Kerala. It's a didn't even study in any English medium schools. I studied everything in my local language until 15. Like you think about maths, physics, chemistry, I know the terms that you commonly know, like acceleration is said differently, or velocity is said differently, things like that. Then it was a big shift from that to going to college and having to learn every subject in English, right? That's kind of big change for you. So I go there, I go for lunch. I've never handled food with knife and fork. I never, like it's India, so you always use your hands.
You
That's
get with your hands.
lost. So I was so nervous to pick that up. I ordered soup because soup is simple. You can use a spoon to do it.
Spoon.
They must have thought I'm like utter weird, which I was at the time, right?
Like, who is
So,
this guy ordering
like,
only soup for lunch?
so I came back, and that was a very pivotal moment in my life where came back. And a lot of people, when they immigrate, they want to stick to the roots and cultures and everything, which is rightly to do so. At that point in time, I say, hey, I have to integrate. If I don't integrate, I don't survive. So it's a question of survival, right? It's nothing about culture at that point. Then force yourself to embed into a different culture. So think about coming from land of spices and getting familiar with fish and chips, the blandest
The
food
blandest food.
ever, right? And yeah, so things like that. So then another story was so as I finished this is my second master's program. I was doing my PhD or on the way to PhD when I was leaving India. Then I left academia altogether. And with that, then you're searching for this job. So there's another thing. I heard another podcast in another presenter was talking about how she grew up in a pretty middle class background, and how no was not an answer. So this was way back when, where people were saying, "Hey, how are you going to get this visa? People are talking about visa, not getting it, etc., and so on." And my answer was very bizarre. It's just like it's not applicable for me. And they're like, "Why is it not applicable for you? It's a law of the country. It's applicable for everybody." I said, "Well, there's no other option. So I got to make it work. So I'm going to find a way to make it work." So so the second aha moment was started working in this grocery chain called Sainsbury's in
Mm.
in the daily counter. Right, growing up in India, another thing that you don't have in India is cheese. You only thing that you get is thing called paneer. If you go to an Indian restaurant, they always have paneer. That's a
Paneer?
cheese.
Really?
Yes.
Grocery stores don't have
No,
cheese.
in India, you don't have cheese. Cheese is not a food staple item that you have or staple food that you have, right?
Hmm.
So I'm working in the daily counter, and so I learned a lot about cheese because you have more varieties in the UK than you get in the US. And the other aha moment was so you work alongside in the meat and fish counter along with the daily counter. Sometimes I start pretty early. So there's this older gentleman called Ian who would come to the store, right? And he, for family reasons, had a kid. I would start early. He would come in at about 6 o'clock, and I started noticing how meticulous and disciplined this person is. He's probably about 8 years old, and handling his side of the equation and the store and talking to customers, etc. So I struck up a conversation with Ian. And then it turns out Ian is an entrepreneur, had actually a chain of fish stores in the UK and London, made a ton of money for himself. And I was like, why are you working in the store right now? Like, there's no, it just escapes me, like, why he would do it. So he had sold his business, his children are well set. He said, look, I just need to have something that I want to follow, and this is something that I learned. This is that I know that I do very well, and I want to make sure that I do it extremely well to a high standard. And this just gets me
Hmm.
going. I'm 8 years old. This gets me to get up from bed and doing it. That was a huge aha moment for me,
Hmm.
where there was no money involved. There was no reason for him to work, but the way that he worked, he was very, very humble. He knew something, and then he was an expert in it, and he was driving it. That was a huge life lesson for me. And then I decided, hey, this no matter this is a huge lesson. It's a valuable lesson. No matter what I do, it doesn't. Money is an afterthought.
Hmm.
It's just being excellent at what you do and being humble at what you do. That makes you a better person, in my view.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story. I mean, I think it's helpful also when you're in that chapter of your life. This is when you're doing your PhD, right?
This was post that journey. I was in the UK already, right?
That's post PhD.
No, no, I started master's in philosophy in India. That was like your step one to PhD.
Yeah.
Abandoned it, took the second master's in Glasgow. This is post masters. I'm job searching, working on the daily counter, which is like very typical. It's nothing unusual here. But when you move from a place like India, that's not common, right? You don't go to work when you're studying. So it's a big culture shock. I was just following the whole immigrant journey. That's all.
Immigrant journey. Wow, but my that's my point. I mean, you're basically a double master student at this point. You're, close to the PhD. Like to be it's a humbling moment to have that. And at the same time you're working, at a grocery store
Yep.
and you're learning about cheese and you're basically trying to get a start in a very new country. You probably have zero relationships. Yeah, it's not an easy thing to do.
That's right. The other kind of very important kind of life story is this. Have you read this book called The Alchemist?
Of course, Paulo Coelho. Yeah.
Pablo Coelho. Yeah. So this says that when you want something too bad or so bad it hurts, right? That's the equation the universe provides. So we made the decision, my wife and I, to move to US for family reasons. She wanted to be close to her family. She has family here. I don't.
Mm.
And our agreement was that if I'm leaving UK and going to US, this is where this whole relationship to Teragonia here, right? Where I said the only reason I want to go to US is I want to start a business. If I want to be in a job in the UK is great work-life balance. You get a lot of vacation, etc., and so on. So I can stay here. I'm already qualified. I was working with EY at the time. But if I'm
Hmm.
going to US, I would want to start something on my own. And we made this decision. It was a very then once you made the decision, you go for it. So I tried. In 2 weeks, somebody from Houston office just parachuted into the only non-oil and gas project that I did at the time. She came over. She sat next to me. I helped her with kind of integrating it. It was a few months of assignment, and then I just randomly asked, "Hey, are you taking somebody in?" And she said, "Look, do you have any oil and gas experience?" Which is the only thing that I did, except for this particular project. In 3 days, I had the job offer. I spoke to the team, the partner liked me, and then we got on very well. So I moved to Houston. So that was a big story to kind of move over here, and then eventually I moved from EY to Houlihan, where I set up a practice. And that was the reason I brought that up is that you asked about the relationship, right? So you didn't grow up in the country. In the UK, I studied, had more relationship than the US. I'd never been to US before I came here. So it was a every time it was a challenge in terms of setting up a practice or a business in a country that you've never been and spent little time with, and just going and selling and getting out and break the mold of
Hmm.
having the courage to talk to people. So it's been a very humbling journey, right? You have to. One thing that I know is that you have to fail and embrace failure multiple times. So the one thing that I keep to myself is this Japanese proverb. It's called "Nana Parobi Ya Oki." That means fall down 7 and stand up 8 times.
Mm.
Right? And that's the only thing. That's the best thing in business, right? You have to fail, and don't be afraid to fail. But then you have to have the courage to stand up next time. You just cannot stay down.
I love that. Well, I think you also you moved through some very very different cities. You go from India, you go to London, London, Houston, Houston, and now you're in Chicago. Every time you were setting up, I want to just drill down a little bit on your time. So after EY, you go to Houlihan Lokey, and you spend a lot of time in you become basically a director for financial due diligence, and you're setting up in each of these like larger corps. You're setting up practices. You then start their digital value practice. I want to kind of lean on your consulting background, your strategy background, because you were on the other side of
Yes.
entrepreneurship. With Teragonia now as a CEO, you're running your own startup and you're building, a really really cool startup in Chicago. But at one point, you were on the other side of the table. So I'm curious, what lessons were most important to you from EY to Houlihan that you now use as a CEO of a tech company?
Yes. So a very interesting question. For all the firms that I work with, well, which is only two, EY and HL, Holy and Lockheed, really great people, really great firm, a lot of support. Like I mentioned, my desire or underlying motive to move to US was starting a business, right? So when I was at EY, I tried to be more market facing. Also,
Hmm.
although it is not in my nature, when I grew up, in my family, there was a common joke that I would be either a banker or a professor. I would never, ever be in a sales role. And it was,
Why is that?
I like books. I like to read a lot. And so I spent it's a fun story. When I grew up in an island. When I say island, no bridge. So it's a true island, zero connectivity. If you want to go from the island to the other side of the land, there's a canoe that the government has placed in, and this person was a big 30-foot long bamboo stick. You put the stick to the floor of the riverbed, and that's how this thing moved. Right? If you have a vehicle, it's outside the island. You're parking it outside, and you're coming to the island. And this is not a time when you have TV or forget internet. That was '96. Right? So this is too late. So the only entertainment that I had is a village library. So
Mm.
by the time I left the island, which I was 12 years old, to as my family moved, I had finished the whole library, every single book in the library. So I was a big bookworm, and for a personality like that, the last profession that you would think about is being in sales. And even at EY, when you grew up, so that's the reason when you're asking about the consulting journey and practice.
Mm.
After a couple of years in the US, I went to my partner's office and I said, I don't. Good friend of mine, great friend Travis Young, still is. I clearly remember this conversation that, hey, I don't think I'm going to stay here more than 18 months. And he was asking me why. So I said, well, I know I'm going to make the promotion. I just don't think that I'm cut out for sales. It's very, very hard for me. I'm deeply technical. I don't want to go do sales. And his response was, nothing else, right? So it's like you're not trusting yourself was essentially what it is. That's how he goes. Then I just came out of that room thinking that maybe he sees something in me that I don't. And you call it this Joharian concept of different type of blindness that you sometimes you other people see things in you that you don't. So this is probably one of your blind spots. If that is the case, why don't I give it a shot? And
Mm.
from that moment onward, I started attending networking events, that really, really pushing me in front of cold situation, which is super uncomfortable, still uncomfortable, but it is what it is. You have to deal with it. Then, because I started trying, the other people around me started picking on it and just gave me more and more responsibilities that are more market facing. Then eventually I found my rhythm, started generating revenue at a much junior level, and built a really large book in a new position that I took on. And that gave me the
Mm,
confidence to move to Huli and set up a practice from nothing. Was also part of EY travel was becoming a challenge for me, and then I needed to kind of stay close to house. So two things, my move from EY to HL, the big desire was, or big aha moment was, it's the culture and the team that you work with. Very quickly discovered that I can design something, I can sell something, but if I don't have a team, this is nothing. It's all about the team. That was the biggest aha moment. Went back to my core behavior of reading and watching videos because I don't know, I don't think I'm good at it, so I have to learn.
mm,
Then I started looking at high performance teams and where where do high performance teams exist most in the world? Sports. So I started watching and following a lot of sports coaches, sports managers, learned a lot of lesson in terms of if you have star athletes, they don't they hate mediocrity. They want to perform. They go hard at it, but also you have to think about when they need breaks, when they are teetering, injuries, all that stuff. The whole philosophy that I ran at HL and continue to run at Teragonia is entirely based on that. You get high performing people who want to run harder. They're they're not the ones to kind of take a pat on the back all the time because they
mm,
want you to tell them the truth in a nice way, of course. Right? Don't don't be mean, and kind of reading the pulse on when they need that break, what motivates them, and the biggest thing when you're managing to these sales or the sports team is also same conversation that I had with my partner back in the day. It's not about what motivates you. That's just 20% of it. 80% of unleashing human potential, probably 95%, is understanding what they are afraid of, what they are hesitant to do. So outside of morality reason, you're not asking anybody to do anything illegal or immoral, but what is it that really you're really afraid to do, and then helping them conquer that fear. So once you do that, once you show people how to get there, which is basically making them really uncomfortable, being uncomfortable, that's a journey,
mm.
but that's a very sports methodology. So I was watching this forgot the name of the documentary. I think it is called The Playbook in Netflix. Jose Mourinho, um, the yeah the biggest coach in
Oh, is this where like they follow different coaches?
that's right,
That I love that
that's right,
series. That was awesome.
that's right. So Jose Mourinho says something in the well. That's the one thing Dr. Verse said, and one thing that Jose Mourinho said that really stuck to me, which was Jose says, "Look, I'm never telling Cristiano Ronaldo how to handle the ball, right? None of my players, I don't need to tell them how to play soccer. They know it very, very well. That's why they are in one of the best teams in the world. But I'm going to tell them how to play in the team that I manage. I'm going to tell them how to manage your position, right? And
Hmm.
then that's where I'm very strict on. That's my job as a coach. So I don't need to be a good player because I'm not really teaching skills. I'm managing a team. So that was very important. Understanding a player's strength and weaknesses and vulnerabilities and how that fits into a team and how together that team works really well. That was one thing. Dr. Ver's comment was like, you work so hard to be in a position where you are going through extreme stress and duress, but run towards it and embrace it. Don't run away from it. Always remember that you worked way too hard to get to this
Hmm.
position, right? And so this is part of the equation. Just embrace it. So those two things.
Do you remember Doc Rivers, by the way, the basketball coach,
Yes,
the well, formerly Boston. I think he's at where is he now? Philadelphia? No, that's Nick Nurse. Anyways, but he was the coach when the Celtics like were on their prime,
yes,
and they were at that time my favorite team. And he talks about the philosophy of Ubuntu,
yes.
South African, philosophy and ideology of I am because you are, and it's always about the collective, and I'm on this earth so that I can feed. your energy, and together we create this collection of, abundance or whatever. It's a very interesting method that he put into Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, because all of them were like these alpha high performing athletes. Each were like big celebrities at the time. So how do you make them fuse together versus play separately and selfish basketball? Like how do you actually play as a cohesive unit? Very difficult to do when you have high egos.
That's great to it. The two words that fed into one of our core beliefs in Teragonia are Ubuntu and Kaizen. Exactly that. And I don't,
Okay, the Kaizen philosophy,
yeah, Kaizen is the other one, the continuous improvement,
improvement.
every single area that they're speaking of. So how do we manage ego would be my biggest challenge. And
Mm,
therefore, the three values that Teragonia has: intellectual humility, integrity, and innovation, in that order. Innovation comes third, right?
interesting.
So the intellectual humility was a desire to crush egos, meaning humble yourself. You can express, be open and express your views, but express it in a way that you should always recognize that there's something that you always don't know. And the most junior person in the room could enlighten you in that aspect. So be humble.
Mm,
Our principle coming out of intellectual humility is what we use every day, which is called debate with decorum. So you can debate, you can challenge everybody, attack the problem, not the person, but debate with decorum in a way that everybody is encouraged to express their opinion. It's funny that you said that. Then that feeds into also personality types. If you are an extrovert, then you have no problem expressing your views. But
mm,
if you're introvert, it takes you a long time to express your views. Sometimes, if you're, especially with a lot of engineers in Teragonia, you like reading and you like dropping notes, and that's how you think, not by speaking. If you ask me, I like to express my view by speaking. So one of the first of applications that we procured at Teragonia was Miro, and the reason was Miro is a virtual board that where teams can come together and put their sticky notes and things like that. The
mm-hmm,
reason I made sure that we procured that was exactly this introvert extrovert dynamic in a meeting, where if you are having a meeting, only extrovert people speak, introvert people find it very hard to express themselves. So you're not getting the maximum out of your team members who are really really bright. But if you give them an opportunity to express those views in their own environment, right, or their own cave, so to speak, then the best ideas come forward, right? So that way they can go back and kind of think about it, and then add to the thought process. Because the bigger we were creating something very very new, and we are creating new every day, and that requires constant innovation and introspection. If I'm not able to draw the maximum out of my team, how am I going to do it? So that whole thing about Ubuntu to continuous improvement to how people crushing or managing egos to how that manifests in a day-to-day meeting or communication within the companies. Now you've got whole strength.
mm. I did want to comment, and I love that, by the way. Yeah, I'm really enjoying the sports analogies here. What I wanted to comment on, actually, I found super interesting, and I haven't heard that before, is your comment around when you're trying to build teams. The one thing that you try to focus in on is what someone's biggest fear is. I found that such an interesting position, because usually, to your point, it's like we in business, you usually focus on what motivates. What's like your incentive, what's your driver, what wakes you up in the morning, right? All these key kind of tactics, and you're trying to get under the surface. But I've never seen it from the other side, which is what scares you the most. And let me help you, get closer to that fear, and let's sort of unlock it and work on it together. It's part of your self development. And what a great way to build loyalty from people working on your team and in your company, that they see you as like you're really taking time to care about something that they want to work on, above and beyond their immediate task and role. What a cool thing to actually focus on.
Yes, because if you conquer your fears, then you're increasingly realizing your potential. Right?
Mm,
There are things that hold you from doing something, right? So there's an interesting story. It's a bit of theology, but I'll explain it in this context. And I always think about it. So a person climbs a mountain. It's late, big avalanche falls down. He's attached to a rock. not a big believer in God, but he's dangling and he knows he's going to die of hypothermia if he stay there. He speaks to God. If there is a God, just get me out of here, right?
Yeah, help me climb the summit.
Yeah, and he hears his thought in his mind that cut the rope, right? And he's like, he just couldn't do it. He just couldn't cut the rope. So next day, the search and rescue team found him dangling dead on the rope, 3 feet above ground.
Wow. Yeah.
So I'm not talking about theology here. It's more like that fear is the rope to cut, and unless someone tells you there's a net below, 3 feet below, you're not going to cut it.
Mm-hmm.
So all you need to do, there was nobody to convince him that there was a net below that, because he didn't want to die of falling. And so if you kind of even show an illusion there is a net, people will cut the rope, and then they realize their potential. It's the most beautiful thing to see, actually see.
Mm. I resonate with it. It's almost like the Dark Knight, Batman. Do you remember when he's trying to jump? Yeah, he had to cut the rope. Yeah, that's my favorite scene from that movie too, because you really have to. If you always have like a pillow that you're gonna fall on, you're really never going to push it beyond what's comfortable for you. I think that's the other piece that comes to mind. Curious for you, when you were starting Teragonia, which I'm blanking on the. You started in, well, technically launched it in 23, I think, right?
Right,
2023.
March 23, yes.
So, what was your biggest fear
What was,
becoming a CEO of a growing startup? Like, if I were to ask you that,
yeah.
what would
Uh,
that?
I just, my biggest fear for that was, could be career ending, right? So if
Mm,
you're a technologist, if you're a mathematician like my co-founders are, you can just, you're exercising a skill that is valuable again, right? You don't want to go expose yourself at a senior level. And I had pretty risk-free, meaningful income coming hitting my bank account to go and expose myself and set up a business and turn out this is a failure, right? So so the fear of not the idea not working out, or kind of the fear of the unknown, because there are things that you wouldn't you can't expect in a business. Things change every day, every hour. Forget the month or big plans, and then just, well, my family was a big reason to support me. My wife did say my son still is in college. It's a huge decision to make that jump when usually you would just finish the kid to come out of the college and then do something like this. But both of them said, hey, they know I really want to do it. And the counter fear of failure was fear of regret, or living with the regret that I never took the plunge when I
mm,
had when I had the chance. Then it all came down to risk management. As my one of my core principles is be risk aware and not risk averse. If you are not risk aware, you're just foolish because you just
mhm,
didn't think it through. So understanding what could go wrong. I forgot the name of the CEO of the founder of Zoom, and it stuck to me like one time. And COVID actually played a big part in it. I'll come to that. So he's read it somewhere in one of his interviews where he said he wakes up and thinks what could kill the company, what is it that could kill the company, like every day. So if you think like that, then you're just being risk aware all the time. Not that you're risk averse, but you're thinking about what's your response to that risk. And quite funny enough, our investors, who shall remain unnamed for their confidentiality reasons, very, very experienced investors, professional investors, and I have one of them is my board member. His question every time we meet, which is every 2 weeks, what are the key risks? What are the risks that you see? And at the time, for me, there's no answer, right? Because everything that you see is an opportunity or a risk. You just cannot balance it. Over time, if you ask me right now, I can kind of think about what are the key risks and how we are managing it. So my biggest fear was that losing face, kind of being exposed, but then it was counterweighted by the fear of regret
of
or
regret.
potential regret.
Yeah, I mean the army. I heard the army. There was a panel of former Army and Navy SEALs folks turned private equity cold war. As it wasn't on the panel that we did at our office, but a different event. And one of the guys said something that really, that I found very interesting, which is They take risks, not chances. And so it's all about contingency planning. You don't go into a battlefield taking a chance. That's completely idiotic. Like you go, you understand there's a risk. It's the most obvious risk in front of you, and so they figure out what are the things that can go wrong, and they sort of plan for crisis mode.
Yep, it's a because it's the same environment, right? I think what they call it WOCA. Forget extreme ownership. They talk about that
Oh
all
yeah,
the
Joko Willink.
time. Yeah, Jocko Willink, right? And Leif Babbitt.
Mm,
One of my favorite books.
yeah, that's awesome. Where there's a lot of similar parallels. So, 2023, we're almost 2 years in, let's say, just for ease of time frames here. Walk us through like what I didn't really get the chance to ask you why did you decide to build what Teragonia is today, which for a lot of people listening, it's in a nutshell, you provide the right analytics for private equity owned businesses and founder owned businesses so that they're equipped with the right data to actually make improvements in their financials and their operational performance. If I can describe it in kind of a linear phrase. But why out of all the problems you could have, decided to tackle, why this specific one?
That's not the problem, George. That's what we do, right? The why or the what really is the problem is rapid business scaling,
Hmm.
right? That's what private equity firms do. So they buy companies and they scale it three, four, sometimes 10 times in about 60 months. What is that? So this is very interesting that you say that. The problem we are solving is how to help them to move that fast without things breaking and with clarity and with focus. Analytics, AI, all that stuff, details. That's not the impact. So what happens is when you're an entrepreneur or founder or family who ran a business got it to about 150 million dollars, and you either need capital or expertise, or you want to go buy other companies. That's what private equity firms provide. They provide the capital, they provide the professional advice, they provide the mergers and acquisition expertise, which is kind of centralized within a firm. But what really happens is now you don't know, you can't just call George and Paul and everybody around you who you used to work with, and they know what the business. If you have a problem, then you would call them and you resolve it. You know your customers. When you go to that north of $100 million revenue equation, now I'm just taking an arbitrary number. The scale could be different for everybody. Once you go beyond a certain scale, your management style needs to change, your management framework needs to change, your operational practices need to change. Everything needs to be built for scaling, right? And one way to objectively assess where you're what are you doing and where you're going is data, right? So you take the we cannot solve for the human equation. That's something the company needs to do. That's what the CEO's job is in terms of managing. There's a culture and the strategy and frameworks and protocols and policies. From a Teragonia's perspective, using technology, we can solve for that data equation that provides them that clarity and focus. So said in another way, again, going back to the sports route, I'm a big motorsports fan. And
Motorsports, you were saying?
yes,
Okay, interesting.
huge F1 fan. And I would say we are the we are the whole race engineering team who comes with the stadium. So we
Mm,
don't have a stadium. You can race in our stadium. If you want to us to build a stadium, we can build you that stadium. We do that for a living. We have the whole engineering team, the mechanics, everything that help you to race, and we can help you build your own race engineering team as you build it, right? So that's because now the difference is if you are used to driving a Corolla and now you're, let's say, driving 1,000 horsepower car, which is a private equity backed company with all the horsepower behind you, make sure that you don't spin out and you have the right metrics and everything to kind of win the race. And you have to know it's not a fun race where you have to win. That's the CEO's job. So that's the analogy that we use, right? We bring that engineering mindset. The expertise is the CEO, right, or the board collectively. So you're taking it that one person. That person needs to drive the car. We can only give them the best car and the
mm,
metrics and everything associated with it. How you negotiate a corner and how you get out of it and how you kind of overtake somebody else. That's your expertise, right? That's your business expertise. We are not racers. We understand racing, but we are not racers, right? So that's the best analogy that we can give you. But it's that scaling when you go from a sub $100 million business to 400, 500, people struggle with it. And there's no, and then you have to think about, you asked about why we decided to solve this problem. Two more reasons. One is when you are in that type of scaling situation and you trust your own team that has business contacts, there's no reason to go advise them. That's a business officer's job. We just need to give them the right measures to kind of go do it. But then you have 80-ish different sub industries. I'm just putting a number out there. Different sectors, even within the same exact business, people look at data differently. So how do you solve for all of this? And how do you build a stack that works for technology stack that works for all of them? Those are very complex problems, right? And I liked solving that problem, having putting a framework or rigor where everyone else sees noise. So cutting through that noise and solving that problem. That's why I have my co-founders who are extremely smart and think through the math and think through the tech. And so for me, that was an interesting problem to solve. The third one is the ability to demonstrate value is very quick. We could have done this for public companies. The reason that we didn't choose to do that was how are you going to demonstrate value for a public companies? There's no way we can impact their share price. In a private equity firm, you can see where how much money that you made and what you're exiting at. So it's easy to kind of show that value and see that value for ourselves, which is intrinsic benefit, right? So
Love that. Yeah. You're a very introspective person, T3. This is the one
how
thing
was
that's jumping.
that?
Every answer has a very self. Every question has a very self-aware answer. How do you consciously carve out time to think about things at a deeper level?
Great question in terms of that's why I said something about COVID, right?
Mm.
So the relationship between COVID and Teragonia is just one thing: audiobooks. So there's nothing else that you could do. You're sitting at home, you're going for walks, and my wife and I take long walks or go for a run. And I started listening to audiobooks. Fun thing, like usually you put on music when you run, right? But if you could keep, this is something I read, I haven't really tested it, but if your heart rate is in a certain range, your attention is up. Your heart rate is beyond that range, you can't pay attention because you're kind of out of breath, right? So something that I figured out intuitively, then I read about it. So I started reading, listening to a lot of books, and one of the books is The Originals by Adam Grant.
Oh, Adam Grant. Yeah,
So
excellent.
he talks about creativity in
Hmm.
terms of what drives creativity. So it's a simple experiment that he ran where it shows the power of experience and intuition in decision making. And there's a direct relationship to Teragonia here. It's two groups of women. One is very fashion pro, understands fashion very well. The other one is kind of very practical, just want to get things done. So they are given the same type of handbags with no brand, and they're asked to assess the quality of the handbag. And the finding is the quality of the results or the quality of answers and the time spent is inversely proportional. So the more with the experience, if the more experience you have and the less time that you spend inspecting and giving an answer, the better the quality of the answer. The more kind of fashion aware group, the less time they spend, the better their answers. On the other side, the more time you spend, if you don't have the experience, the better your answers are. How does that correlate to private equity? Well, and that was an aha moment for me, and I will come to the kind of all the deep thinking question, because that's the mismatch between a financial investor and an operator. You have a CEO or a COO who's been in that industry for 20, 30 years, who are very quick to come to a conclusion or answer, where you have young folks who graduated from very high profile universities, very bright, trying to match up or keep up with the CEO or the board who's like deeply experienced, then you need more data. You need to spend more time with it, right? So therefore there's an inherent conflict between that operator and investor community in terms of their ability to understand, right? It's not the personal conflict. So that actually was the idea. Hey, this is a problem that I should go solve for Teragonia. The deep thinking is, you're right, and I actually go for long walks, or sometimes I take time where I'm not even taking my phone and this not even a laptop, just papers and a pen, and just sit down and write down things to come up with being quiet, right? And I think I've been advised by very experienced CEOs and CEO coaches. You've got to take your team, not just don't do it by yourself, and no computers, no laptop, no nothing. Just be completely manual and just go to the place that everybody can focus. And so I'm going to experiment with that this year.
I like it. Yeah, no, no, that's a good point. This is the problem, man. There's so much distraction. Like you do a strategy session, everybody's on their laptop. As much as you like, it loses. What's the point, you know? Or if you do it virtually, I'm much more of the belief and a proponent of when you get together, especially for that reason. You know, just collectively have conversations. You know, brainstorm away from Googling. You don't need ChatGPT for half a session. Like you're gonna be okay. Resort to just critical thinking.
It is, and I think and one thing that we focus on recruitment when you're recruiting people is that I look for people who are very interested in one question. It is the what if. What if you're constantly thinking what if, then you're pushing very forward, right? Then I'm constantly reminded by my own co-founders that you have to also think about the how to's as well. Because it's one thing to go to
How do
the
you actually do this?
yeah, how you actually do it, but then what ifs open the possibilities, right? In terms of how you kind of how you apply different principles. Another thing that we are very focused on is cross learning, where you do something in one industry, and then how do you take that concept and apply it to another industry, which makes our jobs very interesting, really, because of the breadth of industry that private equity firms and private market in general invest in.
I got one more for you, and I usually ask it in a different way. Like usually, if I'm talking to a founder or CEO, I say, what are some of the lessons that you've learned throughout your career journey that you want to leave the audience with? For you, the way I'm going to ask it is different, which is you've seen companies, you've advised companies when you were at EY, Houlihan. These are high growth, emerging companies, scalable companies. You then now, even more interesting at Teragonia, you're also helping private equity firms kind of do the same, as how do you hyperscale and continue doing that more efficiently. What are some of the attributes that you've realized companies that have scaled, what are those attributes that you want to carry forward? Like what are some of those key components that hyperscale companies share that you want to hopefully realize within Teragonia?
Very very interesting question, right? Because I think from a data perspective, we get it. That's what we do. So that's not even a lesson for us, right? In terms of communication, is the only one word I would give, right? How do you manage communication when the companies that are doing it very well are very good at it? Because there's a saying that in a Roman legions are 150 because that's the maximum one individual can manage as a social network. So if you go beyond 150, what you do. So I look at CEOs who scaled the companies to that level, right? In terms of including Bezos, or Musk. Everybody has a different style of jobs. Everybody has a very, very different style. But then, how do you make sure that everybody is marching towards certain goals? How do you make sure that you can't control after some point? So, what's the lines of communication that you manage to make sure that the ship is sailing in generally the same direction, and not going away?
Mm.
What would you want to give up, right? What it's not about. Since the other saying that is that's like what the really good leaders do in terms of, I would say, if you want to take off your balloon, you need to throw the weight out. Not only you have to put more helium in it, but you have to throw the weight out. So what are you really, willing to throw out? But then you're also, that's your personal journey, but then you have to carry a lot of people, multiple locations, sometimes multiple countries, speaking different language, different cultures. So how do you manage communication in a way that everybody's swim in the right direction? And I'm always amazed by many visionary CEOs who've been really good at it, right?
Any that stand out for you, CEOs that
I think it was not a US CEO, but at the time when I told you, when I was working at Sainsbury's, the grocery chain, it was a public grocery chain. It was a very well-known grocery chain. It had a tough time before I started working there. And Justin King, who was the CEO, turned it around. And you would watch. So I'm a shop floor worker. Yes, I was doing a part-time job. I'm a shop floor worker, but during the onboarding process, you have to watch this CEO speech that he give to his regional managers and store managers about what Sainsbury is about and what they stand for and how that translates to everything that you do, right? And with my business hat on, I thought, what a great idea to scale your message, right?
Mm.
At the onboarding session, you are given this message, and it felt like I was in a university classroom, and the CEO is a professor explaining in very simple layman terms. You're working with not so educated people in most of these stores, right? In at different levels, depending on if you're more advanced than you're educated, but then you're not. How do you carry everybody forward? So when he that video that I watched was kind of an aha moment as well. Hey, this is highly scalable, repeatable. He's not talking to a lot of people. You're just watching a video message in terms of his body language talks about a lot as well, right?
Hmm. That's awesome. I love that. What a great way to end the podcast, like a full circle moment with T3. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you very much for being on the podcast. It was really enjoyable, even though I know we've gotten the chance to know each other a bit more over the past couple of months. I didn't really know the full story. So I commend you on what you've built, what you continue to build in Chicago, and obviously in full support of everything we can do to help you out.
Thank you, George. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to working with you as well.
Wonderful.